Ryan Milton from TeamFFLEX here. Today I want to talk about PEDs for female competitors, bikini, wellness, figure, fit model, divisions like this, and what the side effects are going to be if you decide to, take PEDs. This is actually a requested video based on some comments I got on a former video I did talking about, competing naturally and why I think that's the best way to do it and why you don't actually need PEDs. But a lot of people did ask and wonder in the comments, okay, what are the side effects though? What are the real side effects? And this is a video that, I jot down about 7 different things that I'll dive into on this. I could go much more in depth. I could talk on this for probably like 3-4 days, but I know you're only here with me for a little bit. Let's talk about it though. Let's go down into the nitty gritty of the actual side effects. And these things oftentimes, by the way, are not necessarily spoken to you as a competitor. If your coach is telling you to take PEDs, putting you on these things, I mean, I've heard of coaches calling PEDs supplements even. They're saying they're supplements, like trying to trick you into that it's just a normal thing, like something you could go down to the supplement store in your town and get. But realistically, the PEDs, they're an entirely different ballpark when you get into that. And these things such as steroids, performance-enhancing drugs is what it stands for, or other compounds, other things that are going to, be in a lot of people's mind an advantage to competing, also come with a severe detriment and a lot of side effects, right? So it's really, in the end, not necessarily an advantage. So let's just talk about some of them, and we'll go, step by step through my list here. I got a list of 7 different things I want to bring up, and we'll go through it. So first one, we obviously have to talk about, the female hormones are very, very complicated. It's a very complicated system in general. And for those of you that don't know, your hormones basically operate how your body does everything, from how you feel, from how your brain functions, to how you build muscle, burn fat, how you function through your day. Almost everything in your body is going to be dictated by your hormone profile, right? For women, hormones are much more complicated than even men's hormones, which is why a lot of men, in men's divisions and things can take whatever amounts of steroids and PEDs, and they may not get as extreme side effects. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of extreme side effects there. But basically, when you're a woman and you take these things, it's going to do a lot. It's going to really mess with a lot of things, right? So one of the main things is virilization. And this is the one many people know. You probably know this if you know any competitors that are female that have that very deep voice. A lot of times that's going to be caused, from exactly that PED usage, things like this. Now, don't go find all your friends that have the deep voice and accuse them of taking PEDs. There's a variance of a lot of things, but that is a side effect that can occur if you take PEDs as a woman, right? Where you get a deep voice. You can get increased body and facial hair, things like that you don't really think about, but you may not want, right? Like many women probably would not want the deepened voice or the increased body hair, facial hair, things that can occur with that. And that is something you hear a lot. It's not really reversible. I've seen some women claim that they've reversed that, once they've got off the stuff, whatever, that their voice has gone back. But for most, you don't hear that. And a lot of them are very upset if, they've got to that point where they have a deepened voice now and they just have that for the rest of their life. Also with that virilization, there's actual changes to the female anatomy, okay? Like the sex organs that, again, are probably not an ideal thing that many people would want to have. That's an individual base. I can't obviously speak on that for everybody watching, but there is going to be potential anatomy changes that will be, again, irreversible. So it's another major factor. I mean, a lot of women, they just hear these things and they already understand, okay, those are big deal things, but a lot of coaches are not talking about these things, right? A lot of coaches are not bringing that up when they say, take this, take that. They're looking for those trophies. They're looking for, you to swipe the card basically to train with them. And, you're taking these different compounds, these PEDs, these steroids, other things that are going to alter your body significantly. Okay. So those are potential. Keep in mind, right? I mean, there's going to be outliers, people that maybe don't get those effects. You'll hear from all the coaches in the game that say, oh yeah, it's what everybody does. It's normal. Don't worry about those effects. It's not going to happen. We can reverse it. We'll do it smarter. We'll do it better. We'll take this in conjunction to reduce side effects. Hey, you know what? Here's the best way to make sure you don't get side effects. Don't take it in the first place, okay? The next thing is still in the same one tier of hormonal imbalances, right? Menstrual irregularities. This is a big one to a lot of women, obviously. Many women take their menstruation, their period very seriously, and you should, because again, it's a function of proper female body function, right? If you are having a regular cycle, everything like that, that's going to keep your hormones in, where they need to be, and everything that's going to be good there. And it keeps your fertility good and everything else that a lot of women also do consider for factors of if they want to have a family one day, so on and so forth. And overall, it's just a good indicator of your health, and you hear, unfortunately, in the sport of competing and everything else that women get very used to the idea of missing periods and think that's normal and think that's good, or, hey, it's not necessarily a good thing. It's not a normal thing. And a lot of times if you do have that happen, it's due to maybe an extreme practice or hormonal imbalance of some sort, right? So that's a big deal. That's a big deal in a lot of ways. And you will definitely get those taking PEDs, because basically you're introducing a mix-up of hormones into your body that wouldn't otherwise be there. And so that can be a major effect where you can disrupt it. You can have irregular periods. You can have entirely no periods, right? Just based on the hormone profile that's being created by taking PEDs. So pretty big issue, right? Like a pretty big issue for a lot of women, I think. Next one on that same tier is going to be estrogen, progesterone disruption, right? So again, female hormones here. This can cause mood swings, libido changes, symptoms like aromatizing of steroids in your body. So basically what it does is, again, it's just disrupting your hormones. It's totally jacking you up, making you feel off in every way. And it, can really affect your mood. Like, it's not uncommon to have some, competitors that when they're on prep and they're taking XYZ, their whole life kind of falls apart. And everybody who's paid attention to the sport long enough knows those competitors, knows those people. Like, they lost their job on prep. They had a relationship that they no longer have because of prep, or, they've had a falling out with their friends, their family, whatever. And a lot of it is due to things that are out of your control, due to how your hormones are just going wild, right? Like, they're just going crazy, and it can make you feel all types of ways and all types of different feelings that are not going to support your goals, on stage or off of it, right? So it's a pretty big deal when we really get down to it. Now, I want to move into my category 2 here. Cardiovascular issues. So this is real health issues, right? Like elevated blood pressure, cholesterol levels, increased risk of heart disease and stroke. This is what we know these types of things can do. Cardiac hypertrophy, definitely as well. That's basically an enlarged heart. That can happen, especially with prolonged use. There's many cases of bodybuilders, that have been competing for a long period of time that have these things. And, you hear of bodybuilders, unfortunately, often, maybe older school bodybuilders, long-time bodybuilders, having heart attacks, unfortunately passing away from those things, or having complications that require surgery or other medical interventions. And big deals of things that people don't pay attention to. That these are your general health functions, though. These are the things that are going to dictate, your longevity, how long you're going to live your life, how healthily you will. Like I always tell competitors, there's going to come a day you hang up the heels. You don't want to compete anymore for whatever reason. Sometimes people they've done everything they want to do. Sometimes they decide they want to go down a different avenue of their life. Sometimes they want to, have a family, have a focus, do something like that. And, a lot of times the things that you've caused yourself from taking PEDs and stuff can shut those things down in a lot of ways, or at least reduce them, right? If you develop, health issues such as these issues that can happen from, taking these to your heart and other things, that's going to be a seriously detrimental effect to, your ability in life and your health overall, which again, to me, you should never do that for the sake of competing. I mean, like I've said, bikini, wellness, figure, fit model, especially. You can compete in these divisions, absolutely, especially at the amateur level, 100% without taking PEDs. So again, if you don't have to go down these routes, you don't have to go down these paths, why would you even risk this type of stuff, right? Like, people worry about additives in their food and seed oils and food dyes and silly things, worried about BPA plastics and whatnot, but you're going to take things into your body for the sake of doing a competition that are going to potentially do these things to you, right? So on that list, we move down to number 3 here. Kidney and liver damage. All right. So this becomes pretty common with oral steroids, especially. They can get into your liver. They can cause damage. They can cause tumors. They can do the same thing with kidneys. Kidney strain from, high protein diet that you're going to see on a bodybuilding diet anyway, coupled with PEDs, becomes a problem for the kidneys in a lot of ways too. So you not only can develop, kidney issues from this, you can also develop liver issues from this. And I've known competitors, okay, that have literally, there's been many times in my career, I'm doing a consult call and XYZ, somebody will be coming from different coach, different team, different background, whatever, and they're taking something or they want to take something, they'll ask me, right? Like that's a pretty common question I get asked on consultation calls when I'm talking to competitors is like, hey, what's the PEDs? What are we going to be doing? How do we do it? And I've known competitors that did not train with me because of the effect that I wanted to do it naturally. I said, hey, not a thing we need to be doing. I don't think you need that. Let's do it, naturally. Let's train. Let's do the diet. Let's do the cardio. Let's work on this and see where you land because I think we can do great. You don't need that stuff, right? And they, have not signed up because if somebody wants to take PEDs, or they're going to be taking them, a lot of you, if you were taking them or are, you probably already clicked out of the video because you're like, I don't want to hear this stuff, right? So obviously they're not going to train with me if they want to be on PEDs, and I've trained them naturally, and that's my philosophy, that's my idea. And I've paid attention to those competitors and I've known them, over time, because a lot of times when I do a consult, I'm talking to somebody on Instagram or something, I may be following them or whatever. What ends up happening, is I've seen in my career definitely many, many times over now, competitors that went on to, go with some other coaches or other teams or whatever that were willing to put them on everything under the sun and did. And they developed permanent organ damage to things like their liver and their kidneys and, other issues. There's many other organs that can be dramatically affected by PED usage, especially depending what you're doing, how much of it, how many of it, and, obviously too as well, this is all coming to you from a bodybuilding coach. This is not coming to you from an expert, a medical expert that's putting you on it for a health reason. It's a bodybuilding coach that probably is just regurgitating stuff that they heard, they learned, whatever. But you never really learned anything anyway because it's all just a bunch of bro science, right? It's not like it's a medical practice to be putting you on PEDs in any capacity for a bodybuilding show, right? So again, I've known those people. I've known people that have unfortunately passed away from taking PEDs and crazy peak week type of things and, whatever. And every time it comes up in the industry, everybody kind of turns their head and doesn't really want to look at that as a real possibility. But, every single one of those people that had that, they ended up unfortunately dying, or they had lifelong, damage to organs, kidney, liver, whatever, that changed their outcome of their life and their health forever. Those people all thought that wouldn't be them either, right? They all sat there and eventually saw a video like this and said, no, that won't be me. This guy's crazy, he's talking about natural. Everybody's on stuff. Well, I'm going to be on stuff because everybody's on it. And boom, there it is, right? So big problem, big issue, I think. Okay, now let's move down into actual musculoskeletal effects, right? So basically when you train and you take PEDs, what ends up happening is you're building muscles and you're building other things, very fast at a superhuman pace in a lot of words, right? Ways, right? In other words, I can't talk anymore. So many topics on here. But basically what ends up happening when you have that rapid growth, your tendons and other things do not grow at that same rate, right? So like tendons that insert your muscles and everything, they do not grow at the same capacity. So you end up getting very big muscles, very strong, but your tendons are still weak and normal and not superhuman because of the PEDs, right? So what ends up happening a lot, and you see it, is a lot of competitors taking PEDs get very bad injuries. Like they'll entirely rip a muscle off of something. We've all heard of those people, and we've seen the videos on YouTube, maybe things like that. I've seen, so many of them. But it's very common. It can definitely happen, where you've, again, not your tendons and everything, they don't catch up. And it almost like dries out your tendons in a lot of ways, right? So that's, even if you don't get to that though, you're going to at minimum get joint pain and, other things that are going to come from taking PEDs because, again, you're basically pushing those muscles to superhuman levels at a rate that they would not grow at, and such that can create issues for obviously, reasons like bikini, wellness, fit model, things like this that don't require a ton of, super heavy lifting and crazy stuff like that. It's maybe less of an issue, but it's still an issue. This is still something you should be worried about, right? This is still a major side effect that can have, pretty serious effects. Like if you tear a muscle off something, you injure something dramatically, or any of this, anyone who's ever had an injury, whether it's from PEDs or not, by the way, like it sucks to have an injury, right? Like I've had many injuries in my lifetime as a lifter from basically doing dumb things, lifting too heavy and doing, crazy stuff, not from PEDs, because that's not my philosophy yet again. But, I've had injuries that put me out of the gym for 6-8 weeks, sometimes longer. It sucks. It's like nothing worse, especially for you competitors out there. And you could have something simple where, you're taking this stuff and you pull your Achilles tendon, something like that. And now you can't do your cardio, can't do your squats, can't do your deadlifts. Well, your prep's over and you are, psychologically, which is the next thing on the list, actually going to have a lot of problems. So our next thing on the list, by the way, if you're enjoying this and you like this, you want more stuff on PEDs, natural competing versus, all that, let me know. I'm happy to do it. This, again, is a video from the comments. People wanted this. That's what I try to bring to you on the channel. I pay attention to my comments. I read every single one. I appreciate that a ton. And I come on here and I make those videos because I want to bring to you what you want to see. And that's what we're doing. All right. So number 5, psychological effects. Okay, so pretty big deal here. Mood disorders, including aggression, which can sometimes be categorized like roid rage, right? Like everybody knows about those things. There's been a lot of news reports about that over the years of saying, oh, this person was, in this sport or this and that, and we suspect roid rage, whatever. I don't really like the term roid rage, but really for women especially, you can expect a lot of mood disorders and, aggression, anxiety, depression, these types of things that become very, very detrimental to your life, right? Like they become huge pullbacks from every area of your life. If you start getting depressed, you start having a lot of anxiety, you have aggression, whatever, it does not fit your lifestyle in a lot of ways, right? Because these things are being created artificially by the PEDs and whatever you're taking, not because that's who you are. So again, this is part of what I was talking about earlier, where like your life can fall apart, relationships can fall apart. You can, if you got kids or something, you end up being not as great of a parent in those times. You can lose your job. You end up having a problem where all of a sudden boss is pissing you off. You mouth, all kinds of things can happen, and it does happen. It really does happen. And, depression, such a big deal. Depression absolutely will, anyone who's ever experienced that, it'll ruin every single area of your life, right? And like that can be dramatically increased and or created by taking PEDs, right? Which again, we lose a lot of competitors, unfortunately, and a lot of bodybuilders in general and fitness people in general that get on PEDs. There's a lot of them lost to, unfortunately, suicide. And, correlations and things, we don't have a lot of that, but there is data in those realms, right, where you could say that steroids and PEDs and things like that can severely impact mental, psychological effects to the point where maybe that's a major factor in those outcomes. And again, this is all speculation because there's not a lot of hard research into this, because if I haven't said it, it's not even on my list. It's pretty funny, but these things are illegal. You're not supposed to be doing this, right? Like this is not something that is getting studied by the government, because it's not supposed to be happening. It happens in the dark circles of bodybuilding, in the black market, if you will, where these things shouldn't be happening. They shouldn't be being done. But if they are, again, that's you're dealing with the effects of the unknowns of things that are not really being studied. They're not really, going with. Another major one with that, psychological effects, in other words, dependency, right, on PEDs for body image, body dysmorphia that comes from it, right? Like competitors, even if you compete naturally, that there's a little bit of that happens to a lot of people with body dysmorphia in general, which you get so, dialed in for your competition. You look a certain way, you get used to a certain level of body fat, you get used to a certain level of look. You love that look. You love where you're at. And then, everybody knows when the comp's over, you go the other way, right? Like that's what happens. When you got to build muscle, you got to raise the calories, you got to, add some body fat. You don't look the same as when you were competing, right? It's just what ends up happening. And that kind of gets in people's heads, and they get very hungry, to get back to the stage and this and that, or they may deal with struggles in their improvement season. In my opinion, you don't have to always go through that. There's a lot of ways, if you have a good coach, it's doing custom programming and, really guiding with you, working with you like I do with my athletes. You don't have to, gain 40 pounds in the off season, do things like that. Some do, that's just the way it goes in the sport. But a lot of competitors really do go that way because they don't work with a coach, or they don't have a coach, or they do the prep and then they're done, or they have a coach that doesn't really care and, they're done swiping the card. So, game over. But that dependency can really come from PEDs too, because if you take PEDs and you get to these superhuman levels of aesthetics, right? Superhuman levels of being lean and muscular and your look, And then the only time you have that is when you're on the stuff. That's going to put dependency in there, right? Where it's almost like you're sitting there, you think you have to take them 24/7 because you refuse to look any other way, which I know to those of you watching that are natural, and you're like, wow, that sounds pretty intense. That's not that intense to somebody who's taking PEDs, right? Like that's just part of their day. They say they're on it, they have to be on it, and they find a way, despite, many of the other things I just talked about being probably a serious issue. So with that, you got to factor in that that's a major, major issue if you become dependent on it, almost like a drug or an alcoholism or anything like that, where now you're taking, these things and probably doing it very unhealthily. Keep in mind, there is no healthy way to do this, in my opinion, right? You should just avoid it. But if you end up being on stuff 24/7, you're doing this all the time because you can't deal with not looking the way you look when you're off of it, right? Which is very, very big difference. I've done videos on this years and years back, by the way, where I compared men's open bodybuilders when they were on, their prep and competing versus not. And, the main factor is going to be the difference of the steroids there. And it's dramatic. It's dramatic. Go look those videos up on this channel if you want to see that. But it is like night and day. These bodybuilders can look like they do on stage and you're like, what the heck? That's superhuman crazy. And then they look like normal people. Or even, very out of shape people in some instances in the off season when they're off the stuff. So, it can be very, very taxing, especially to women out here that are taking stuff to not be able to look a certain way 24/7. And then you end up making poor choices like staying on things all the time and never even, if you are in the PED realm, giving yourself a break, giving yourself, that ability to hopefully retain some of your health in the process. But again, like I said, no part of this is healthy. I don't suggest it. Okay, a couple more here. And if you're hanging out with me and you like this stuff, subscribe. I appreciate it. Give me a thumbs up. Drop me a comment. I love it. All right. Metabolic and aesthetic issues. Okay, so this again, we start to get into the nitty gritty here, but acne and skin changes such as like oily skin, severe acne, stretch marks from rapid muscle growth. These things that a lot of people may not even factor in as like major issues. They're like, oh, I'll get some zits, whatever, right? Like anybody who's taking stuff and getting these side effects, they're not caring. It's just part of the side effects, but it is an issue, right? It can create a pretty significant issue for some people, again, long-term. If you are not, it's just one of those things where you don't think about it at the time, but eventually you may think about it differently once it's experiencing to you. Like a lot of you watching this, you're like, oh, I wouldn't care. I'll get some extra acne. I'll have that oily skin. I don't care. I'll get some stretch marks. But then when you get it, you might feel a little different. So that's a major one. Another one, insulin, resistance. So that comes from growth hormone, insulin misuse, increasing diabetes risk. So there are competitors that manipulate their insulin, and that's part of, some types of protocols with athletes. And we do see it across the board because, again, another big problem, by the way, is a lot of the coaches, some of the coaches at least, many, we can put it this way, and I can't talk for all coaches out there, but there's a lot. Like I wish I had a list. There'd be thousands and thousands of coaches out there. They coach primarily male athletes, like they coach men's open bodybuilding, men's classic, men's physique, where we know steroids, PEDs, they run rampant. It's very normal in that circle. And, the criteria itself also is not specifically like nobody's going to look like the top Olympians in men's open bodybuilding without a lot of PEDs, right? It's just never going to happen. It's not naturally attainable. And that's the way those divisions have gone. With the women's divisions, it's different, right? Where, again, you can attain that naturally. I put competitors on stage every weekend naturally, and they are, competing and doing very well, winning against competitors taking PEDs even. So, again, can be done. It absolutely can be done in those divisions. But what you don't realize, right, is that most of the practices that come from PEDs and everything else, then, if you've got a coach that coach mainly men and they're used to doing that, a lot of times they just pass that straight on to the women and say, oh, we'll knock a little bit off. We'll do a little less of a dose. We'll do a little this or that, right? So then you start getting into things like growth hormone or insulin or all this that can cause very serious effects. And again, competitors die from this type of stuff. It's happened. It's happened a lot. It happens more than people talk about. And, again, the bodybuilding world, you're not going to find many videos like this because a lot of people don't want to talk about it. They want to turn a blind eye and say, oh, well, it is what it is. So it sucks for them. But realistically, those things can happen. Like, you could be getting told to do different things such as insulin, growth hormone, whatever types of PEDs. and being told there's supplements, or this is normal, or this is fine, or don't worry about this or that. And again, you're like getting a man's protocol told to you by some coach that doesn't really coach female division, says, okay, well, if you take stuff, something's going to happen, so let's do it, right? And again, there's also the main effects of like water retention, bloating, puffiness, stuff like that can affect your stage appearance. This is actually where a lot of the peak week practices come from, right? So a lot of the peak week stuff that everybody knows about that I'm, again, anti to, I don't do, such as, heavy use of diuretics or any use of diuretics. I don't do that at all, but that is common, heavy use of it. Water manipulation, where to the point even you're dehydrating yourself and taking shots of alcohol, trying to get yourself even drier, as they say. Things like that I don't do. Manipulating your diet heavily, all which ways, like eating all of a sudden, 700 grams of carbs one day and negative, 0 the next, things like this to try to manipulate your look, trying to get rid of sodium and do all this stuff. Like many of those crazy peak week practices are usually coupled with a lot of, different steroids, PEDs, compounds, but also the fact that you just simply are counteracting the effects of taking PEDs in the first place, right? Like that's kind of crazy to think about. A lot of this water retention and this bloating and this puffiness and these things that competitors worry about that they're experiencing are actually from a lot of times taking these things in the first place. They're a side effect of it. So you do all these things. Like that's where these practices stem from. Most of the stuff that's done today comes from, bodybuilders back in the 70s and the 80s, taking everything under the sun, not knowing the effects because it was very new at that time, and just saying, well, I don't know what to do, so drink less water because we're holding water. Okay. And we're also just remove all salt from our diet because there's salt holds water, and we'll get rid of the carbs too because carbs, they can hold water. So we'll just do all this stuff. And if we need to dry out more, we'll just dehydrate even further, and we'll take diuretics and we'll do this and that. But really, you're just counteracting the effects of steroids. Like if you don't take these, you won't have those effects. Peak week for my competitors, I say it's the easiest week of your prep. We get to take a little bit of time out of the gym because we only train usually half the way through the week. We get to cruise in because our physiques are ready. Our body is ready to roll. You're good to go. And we're going to go to stage. We're going to have a good time. You're at the finish line. You did it. You did the work. The work was done. The prep is over. You're going to stage. You don't need to take all this crazy stuff and affect, your physique and take all the, and again, this is also why a lot of competitors say their peak week, like I look so good at coming into peak week. And then all of a sudden it was totally trash. I don't know what happened. My physique was gone, or, this or that. And your coach comes up with some crazy explanation that makes 0 sense, but they try to explain it to you to justify it. And in reality, it was their coaching, probably their peak week stuff they gave you, these unpredictable, unknown factors of the diuretics and the changes in why are you prepping a certain way the entire time and then changing it in the end? What are you doing? Why are you prepping all the way out? And then you go change it in the end. That's crazy. That's crazy. Get ready. Stay ready. That's it. That's all you need to do. You hear competitors say after I went out to eat after that, I looked so good the next day. It's because your peak week was crazy. It was no point. It was all just, chaotic. That's the way it is. So all in all, you don't need that stuff. It's just crazy. But that's, again, side effects that come from these things. So a couple other risks. This is our number 7 on the list. And like I said, I could go on and on. I don't even know what time I'm at here. I've probably been going for like 30 minutes. I don't know. But I appreciate you watching. If you've been watching this far, let me know if you want more, part 2, part more, whatever. Talk more about natural bodybuilding, whatever it is. Other risks that you may or may not, factor. Just a couple other ones that I came up with off the top of my head. Immune suppression. So, it's not uncommon that PEDs will suppress your immunity response to anything. So you can end up getting a lot more infections, stuff like this. Very common for athletes using PEDs to have that. Like you can go scrape your leg on something and all of a sudden you got an infection. Now you're taking antibiotics. You're at the doctor. You got to figure that out. UTIs, things like this become more prevalent specifically for women too, as well, because again, you're lowering your immune response, your body's ability to fight things. And for those of you that are worried about, getting sick all the time or anything else or getting the flu or whatever it is, you are going to basically willingly be suppressing your immune system when you're taking PEDs. So you're inviting a lot more of those potential issues, those problems, those things that can come through. Another one, hair loss. So, basically baldness, thinning of hair. Susceptible individuals can have this in their DNA where, a lot of people might hear that, oh, in my genes, I have, this kind of pattern that could lead to baldness. Well, steroids kind of exemplify that. PEDs exemplify that. So if you are one of those individuals, you can have that happen. You see this happen to a lot of men where all of a sudden, they had a head of hair, they got on stuff, they're competing. All of a sudden, 2 years later, they got no hair no more, shaving their whole head because they have no hair. So, that kind of stuff can happen. And then also, I wanted to talk about this one, which is a pretty big deal. Adrenal fatigue, right? So a lot of the things that competitors deal with, adrenal fatigue. Sorry, my system kind of froze up on me there for a sec. Hopefully it didn't freeze up too much. But the last one I wanted to talk about was adrenal fatigue. So this can come from stimulant type of PEDs that are used, like clenbuterol, things like this. Very common in the bikini world, wellness world, to lean out, as we say, right? As you hear, we shouldn't say we say, because I don't say that, because I don't do that, but you do hear it, right? As something to help you lean out. But that's basically, by increasing your metabolic function, your heart rate, it's a stimulant. So it's not necessarily a good way to do it. It's not a good idea. And it causes a lot of issues. I've known competitors that developed permanent heart damage from taking things like clenbuterol and stuff like that. They develop heart arrhythmias and different issues that they will have the rest of their life. But even at minimum, you could crash your adrenals, crash your energy, or develop yourself thyroid problems from taking PEDs. Again, not things you want to do. These things will last, your entire life. They'll last your entire outcome. They're going to be there with you, for you, forever, depending, right? And so, a lot of you out there that have considered it and or took it or whatever, you may be like, okay, well, I hear everything you're saying, but it's already over. Nothing I can do. I've already taken it. That's not really true either, right? Depending on where you're at and what you've done in your journey. Like, I've coached many competitors that XYZ amount of years ago had taken stuff and they wanted to do it naturally, and that's what they want to do now, right? And I'm like, great, let's freaking go. Let me help you as best I can, right? So there is no reason to say just because you've taken things or you've been on it before that you have to continue to do it. Definitely don't. If you watch this video and this gives you, whoa, there's a lot of effects I didn't know about, a lot of things. First off, do a lot more freaking research than what I'm telling you here, okay? Because this YouTube video. This is a YouTube video, all right? If this opened your eyes to things, go to your doctor, check in with your doctor, say, hey, I need to get some things ran. I took some XYZ stuff. Tell your doctor everything you've done, everything you've taken, get some blood work, get some ideas of where things are actually at metabolically with your health, your hormones, everything, and get a path forward, okay? And stay off the stuff. Don't get on it, right? It's not worth trying to be on that and trying to do that and, dealing with that, or just staying on it because you've taken things. There's no point to do that. If you are natural and you've been considering, getting on these things, hopefully these side effects and stuff have dispelled a little bit of that myth for you and turned you away from it. Because again, like I said, for these divisions, you can do this naturally, especially at the amateur level. And you don't need to. You don't need to get on this stuff. So why would you run any of these risks? Like, it's amazing to me the amount of things people will not do in their life because they're afraid of the side effects, right? Like, oh, I don't want to drink too much. I'm worried about what will happen to my liver. I don't want to, I would never be a smoker. I don't want to know what's going to happen to my lungs. Oh, I don't want to take, I don't want to have processed foods because there's food additives in it. And I don't want to. Well, look at all this stuff that's going on with this. I mean, this is, just my simple jot down list that I could go on for days with this. So do more of your own research, and again, like I said, you don't want to get into it. You don't need to. A lot of times if you think you need to take PEDs, it's because you had bad coaching, you had no direction, you had no way to go, or you had a coach even tell you to take it, and then now you think it is. Like, that's something I encounter on consult calls where I hear, oh, I thought I was going to have to. I already did a call with XYZ, whoever, this person, that person. They said, everybody's on it. It's totally normal. I got to take it. It's going to be part of the process. No, you don't need to. I'm going to be, one of the only voices probably out there saying that, but it is true. You don't need to do it. You shouldn't do it, in my opinion. And, you want to avoid having all of these side effects happen. You want to avoid that. It's just the way it goes. So you don't want to have to deal with that. If this was eye-opening to you, okay, I invite you, go do some more research, learn a little bit more about this. But hopefully either way, this has either, got you the idea that maybe you should quit doing the PEDs, or you're never going to venture down that path. And either way, that's a win to me, right? Like, that's why I make this video. I'm sitting here now. I can see my timer finally. It says 35 minutes. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But like, this is why I do this. I do this to hopefully, if one person watches this and they get off, or one person, watching this, they don't get on. Like, that's a huge win for me, and that's all that I want. So if you got anything out of this, and you enjoyed it, you think it's beneficial, share it out. Just hit the share button. I don't ask for shares a lot because I really just am trying to provide to the audience, but I would love more and more competitors to really know about this. I want them to understand these effects. I want them to know these things that they don't hear about and nobody's talking about, or they kind of just put off, say, oh no, not going to happen to you. But I want those things to be reality. At minimum, somebody doing this, whether or not they decide to venture down that path, they should know all of the facts. I think that's important, right? And this is some of the facts. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And again, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Coach Ryan is out.